am the longest-kept canary of Jack, the big shot in the elite circle. People think it's because of my brilliant schemes that I've managed to hold on to this notoriously difficult man. Then one day, he brought his first love back from abroad, and I disappeared, pregnant and quietly walking away from his world. 3 years later, my daughter and I were enjoying ice cream, laughing and teasing each other, when Jack suddenly appeared. He pointed at my daughter and asked, "Angelica, who is she?" "She's my sister. Isn't she adorable?" I stammered, my hands trembling as I tried to come up with an excuse. My daughter, catching on instantly, ran to him, hugging his leg tightly. "Sir, my sister is single, unmarried, and totally available for you," she chirped with impeccable timing. On a scorching summer night, Jack had me pinned against his car, kissing me fervently. "Ange," he murmured, his voice hoarse with desire. "Say you missed me." I shook my head, refusing to comply. His kiss deepened with a fiery intensity. "But I miss you every single day, every night." Chapter 1. I was attending a dreadfully dull socialite afternoon tea gathering. To be precise, it was more like a showdown, the socialites versus the lone canary. The only reason I, with my less than dignified status, could mingle with such high-class women was because of the man I was with, a towering figure as dazzling as the brightest star atop the pyramid of power. The saying, "when one person rises, so do their connections," couldn't be more true. But I've crawled up from the bottom, and my greatest asset is knowing my place and recognizing the reality of my situation. Even though I've been with Jack for almost 2 years, longer than any other woman in his life, I've never let it go to my head. No arrogance, no false sense of security. So here I was, sensibly sitting in the most inconspicuous corner, happily savoring the macarons on my plate. Yet somehow, the conversation inevitably shifted to me once again. "Ange, we're all curious. Mr. Han always looks so aloof and untouchable. He's not like that in bed, is he?" "Exactly. When he so much as glances at me, I feel like I can't breathe." "Aren't you ever scared of him? Is Mr. Han strict in private?" "He's so hard to please." "How on earth did you manage to win him over?" "Just between us, Ange, is he, impressive in that department?" My fork nearly slipped from my trembling hand. "Well, he's just okay, I guess. Nothing extraordinary." "No way. A man like him doesn't scream ordinary in any sense. He's always busy with work. We don't see each other often," I muttered, fumbling for an answer. Just as I was drowning in their scrutiny, my phone buzzed unexpectedly. Chapter 2. Seeing the name Big Boss light up on my phone screen, I breathed a sigh of relief, quickly excusing myself to take the call in private. Jack's voice came through, low and tinged with weariness. "Having tea out?" "Yes, and I stopped by the mall earlier," I replied. "What did you buy?" "A bag and a necklace. Go back and get a new dress." "But I just bought one. A nightgown." "Mr. Han," my face flushed instantly. I glanced around like a guilty thief and hurriedly turned off the speakerphone. "I'll pick you up in an hour." Jack was always succinct. With that, he hung up. I used this as an excuse to leave early, making a quick stop at the mall on my way out to buy a dress. A nightgown, a very sensual one, black, silky, and delicate. It was low-cut at the chest with high slits on either side, subtly adorned with lace. Exactly the kind Jack loved. Chapter 3. The moment I stepped into his Maybach, Jack gestured for me to come closer. I obediently climbed onto his lap and settled in, fresh from a full-body spa. My skin was smooth and radiant, exuding a light fragrance as I leaned pliantly into his embrace. Jack seemed pleased. He removed his glasses, placing them casually in the console, and his long fingers gripped my waist. "Gained some weight?" he remarked, kneading gently, though his tone was approving. "I've been eating a bit more these days. I'll start dieting tomorrow," I stammered, my cheeks turning red. Even after nearly 2 years with him, I still felt shy during such intimate moments. "You don't need to diet. You're perfect as you are," Jack said, tightening his grip on my waist. I rested my head obediently on his chest. "Mr. Han, you just returned from a business trip. You must be tired coming to pick me up. Then shouldn't you properly reward me tonight?" I raised my head in flustered protest. Shouldn't you be saving your energy instead? Jack chuckled lightly, hooking a finger under my strap and slowly pulling it down. Angelica, you've gotten bolder. I'm just concerned about your health. Mr. Han, I mumbled. Jack's gaze swept over me, inch by inch, his fingers brushing the intricate embroidery on my bodice. Fair enough. After all, something ordinary could never satisfy someone as precious as Miss Lu. My eyes widened in shock. The arms wrapped around his waist suddenly felt icy cold. Chapter 4. Jack. I'd lost count of how many times I'd pleaded with him, my soft fingertips unable to grasp hold of him. They fell weakly to the side of the bed. Jack lowered his head, capturing my swollen lips once more. Mr. Han. I barely managed to open my misty eyes, gazing at him through a haze of tears. Ange, he murmured, releasing me only to nip playfully at my earlobe. Relax. No matter how busy or tired your man is, I'll always have the energy for this. Inwardly, I cursed him, vindictive, arrogant, aloof and unattainable on the outside, cool and composed, but behind closed doors, a complete scoundrel. Who would have thought that Mr. Han, who buttoned his shirts all the way up in public and rarely smiled, had one peculiar preference? He loved having me unbutton his shirt for him. Chapter 5. By the time I woke up the next morning, Jack was already gone. As a pampered canary, my daily routine consisted of spending money and killing time. So, I decided to laze around until noon. While mindlessly scrolling through Facebook, I stumbled upon a trending post. Rising star artist Camila to return to China for a nationwide art tour. First stop, Beijing. For some reason, the name Camila felt hauntingly familiar. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd heard it somewhere before. I typed her name into the search bar, and to my shock, the third suggested search was Camila Jack. My fingers stiffened as I clicked on it. The result was a single Facebook post. This is what I imagine when I think of a real power couple, an elite magnate and his unforgettable first love. The post included a blurry photo, but even with its poor quality, it was clear. A tall, handsome man and a petite, beautiful woman. She smiled gently at the camera while he gazed at her with tender eyes. She was draped in his coat. I shut my phone and lay back on the bed, closing my eyes. Memories came flooding in, faster and faster, until one image finally froze in my mind. I was lying in a hospital bed, pale and fragile, my stomach swollen with pregnancy. Jack stood before me, his arm around Camila's waist. Both wore wedding rings on their left hands. His voice was cold and piercing. Angelica, give birth to the child, and I'll pay you 10 million. Camila can't have children due to her health, so this baby will be hers. Take the money and never come back. You should know that having Camila as a mother is the best thing for the child. Chapter 6. So, it turns out I'm just a tragic supporting character in a story. After taking the money and leaving, I became resentful, sneaking back into the country to try and reclaim my child. But the child only loved Camila, refusing to acknowledge me as his birth mother. He saw me as a disgrace. Overwhelmed by despair, I spiraled further into madness, eventually plotting to hire someone to kill Camila. In the end, it was Jack who sent me to a mental institution. I died there a few years later. That was my fate in the original story. And now, Camila is coming back. The gears of fate are beginning to turn. If nothing unexpected happens, last night's madness will lead to me conceiving a child. The final 2 rounds last night were the only times in nearly 2 years that Jack didn't use protection. In truth, this was all part of Jack's plan, wasn't it? For Camila, to give her a child. Chapter 7. Whenever Jack was in Beijing, no matter how late, he would always come home. But this time was different. 2 days had passed, and I hadn't seen a trace of him. The WeChat messages I sent him seemed to vanish into thin air. When I called, he did answer, brief and to the point. As always, the company's been busy these past few days. If you're bored at home, go shopping or have tea. Be good. And remember, not allowed to diet. When will you be back? I'll be home in a couple of days. The call ended, and shortly after, my account balance increased by 5 million. Jack sent a text, buy whatever you want. In the past, Whenever Jack transferred me money, I'd shower him with kissing emojis or write sweet words to play the role of the perfect canary. I'd make sure to keep the big boss happy. But this time, I stared at the chat box for a long while before typing just 2 words, "Thank you." Jack didn't reply. As usual, on the 3rd evening, I saw the news on TV. The usually reclusive and low-profile Jack had made a rare public appearance at the airport to pick someone up. That someone was his legendary first love, Camila. The news footage showed Jack and Camila surrounded by bodyguards. I couldn't catch a clear view of Camila's face. Jack had shielded her from the cameras so well. Unlike me, my photos and videos, candid or otherwise, regularly appeared in gossip tabloids. A treasured first love and a mere plaything. Of course, the treatment wasn't the same. I turned off the TV and went downstairs. Dinner was already prepared. No need to wait for Mr. Han. He won't be home tonight, I told the staff. I sat at the dining table and began eating. I ate with care, savoring every bite. After all, this would likely be my last meal in Jack's villa. Chapter 8. Jack said he'd be back in 2 days. He was a man of his word, so I chose to leave on the night Camila returned to Beijing, when he was likely too preoccupied with her to think about me. I didn't take any clothes or jewelry with me. The credit cards Jack had given me were left where they were, but I had another bank card in my name, with almost 8 figures in the account. The money came from selling the first property Jack ever gifted me. My mother passed away a long time ago, and my father remarried and started a new family over a decade ago, cutting ties with me. Leaving Beijing, I had no idea where to go, so I randomly bought a plane ticket. Just before boarding, my phone rang. In the past 2 years, I had never missed a call from Jack, but this time, I let it ring until it stopped. He wasn't the type to call twice. I turned off my phone, removed the SIM card, and snapped it in 2. As I carried my suitcase up the boarding stairs, I couldn't resist looking back. The Beijing night was starless, shrouded in heavy smog. Truthfully, I didn't even like Beijing. I just liked someone who lived there. Meanwhile, Jack lit a cigarette and dialed a familiar number once more. To his surprise, the cold voice of an automated operator answered. "The number you are trying to reach is currently unavailable. Please try again later." "Sorry." Frowning, Jack pressed redial. The result was the same. He stubbed out the cigarette, turned, and strode back into the private lounge, grabbing his coat on the way out. Camila stood up to stop him, but he avoided her hand. "Stay and enjoy yourselves. I'll host another time." "Jack," Camila's voice trembled as her eyes brimmed with tears. Jack didn't look back, leaving with long strides. As soon as he got into the car, before the door even closed, he gave the driver a cold order. "Drive faster. Head to the one residence villa." Chapter 9. The car sped through the city. Just as they approached the villa, a sudden downpour began. The driver gripped the steering wheel tightly, his focus unwavering as he dared not slow down. Fortunately, the journey was uneventful, and the car eventually pulled up in front of the main building. A servant was already waiting outside with a large black umbrella. Jack stepped out, bending slightly to avoid the rain. "Where is she?" he asked immediately. "Miss ate dinner and then went upstairs to rest," the servant replied. Jack's tense shoulders eased slightly, but his steps didn't falter as he walked into the main building. The house was dark and eerily quiet. Something felt off. For the past 2 years, Angelica had never missed one of his calls, and no matter how late he came home, she would always leave a light on in the living room. There was always a nightlight glowing in the upstairs hallway too. The servant knelt to help him change shoes, but Jack stopped them with a raised hand. "I'll check on her myself," he said. The villa was kept at a constant temperature, but Jack didn't bother to remove his coat as he ascended the stairs. Chapter 10. The master bedroom door was slightly ajar, and the room inside was pitch black. Jack stood at the doorway, his long fingers gripping the door handle. For a moment, he hesitated, reluctant to push it open. The rain grew heavier, pulling his thoughts back to the present. He opened the door. "Ange?" There was no response. The bed was neatly made, the 2 pillows still side by side, but the bed was empty. Jack stood in the doorway for a while before stepping inside. He turned on the lights, illuminating the room. Everything looked as it always had, familiar and unchanged. Her makeup table still held the usual bottles and jars, casually arranged, but on the tabletop lay a few bank cards and a note. Jack's chest tightened as he picked up the note and unfolded it. The message was brief. Mr. Han, thank you for your care these past 2 years. I wish you peace, success, and happiness in the years to come. Sincerely, Angelica. Jack set the note down slowly. The mirror reflected his face, stern, cold, and unreadable, but only he knew the storm brewing within him. His emotions, usually so controlled, felt on the verge of bursting. If Angelica were standing in front of him right now, he wouldn't be able to hold back. He'd discipline her until she submitted completely. Jack turned and left the room. Downstairs, his secretary, assistants, and servants waited quietly. Without lifting his gaze, he ordered coldly, "Replace all the villa staff immediately." "Mr. Han, the one residence doesn't keep useless people," he said flatly, casting a frosty glance at the startled group. He removed his watch slowly, flexing his wrist. His voice dropped even further, becoming almost threatening. "If she returns unharmed, you'll be lucky. If she's hurt, even a single strand of hair, you all know the consequences." With that, Jack strode out. The rain roared outside, and the others barely caught his parting words. "Contact the Aviation Bureau. Find out exactly where she is." Chapter 11. During flights, I often sleep so deeply that I lose all sense of time. I remember the first time I traveled with Jack for a business trip. I had fallen into such a deep sleep that, when I woke up, I found myself completely sprawled on top of him. To my horror, there was even a suspicious wet spot on his shoulder. I was mortified, terrified even, already bracing myself for the possibility that this man, this untouchable force of nature, might toss me off the plane or feed me to the fish after landing. But Jack didn't do any of that. He didn't even scold me. Instead, he simply continued working, glasses perched on his nose as he went through his papers with calm efficiency. When he finally noticed my embarrassment, his voice was unusually soft, almost gentle. "Had a good sleep?" "Yes, Mr. Han," I stammered. "Would you like something to eat?" I nodded, then shook my head, unsure of how to respond. Still, Jack ordered food for me. "Eat something first. I'll wrap this up shortly," he said. After that, I accompanied him on numerous trips, whether for business or vacation. Almost every time, I'd end up curled up in his arms, sleeping soundly. Jack was a man who valued discretion. He rarely used his private jet, but on those occasions when he did, my ears would burn at the memory. The limited space and Jack's mischievous nature often led to situations where I could barely hold back. My voice must not have been as quiet as I thought, judging by the way the flight attendants avoided meeting my eyes when we disembarked. Now, traveling alone for the first time, I couldn't seem to sleep. Maybe I had grown too accustomed to the security of being in his arms. The cabin broadcast announced the flight conditions. It had started raining not long after takeoff, with lightning and thunder intensifying as the storm grew heavier. Many flights were delayed or forced to turn back. When the announcement came that my flight was also returning due to the weather, passengers began grumbling in frustration. "This is rare. I've never heard of a flight turning back because of rain." Someone muttered. "Right? They always say flights never get delayed unless knives are falling from the sky." Another chimed in. An absurd thought crept into my mind, one I immediately dismissed as ridiculous. Jack, with his profound connections inherited from both the Han and Chen families, wielded power that was beyond my comprehension. Even the faintest glimpse of his influence felt like a chasm I could never cross. But no matter how unfathomable his reach, the idea of him orchestrating a flight's return for a woman seemed laughable. A man as composed and restrained as Jack wouldn't do something so absurd. Not even for me. Planes turn back for all sorts of reasons, weather, technical issues, emergencies, but never for a woman. Chapter 12. At the airport, passengers were accommodated in nearby hotels. I retrieved my luggage and joined the crowd moving toward the exit. But when I reached the terminal hall, I stopped. I stood there, waiting, until the first light of dawn broke through the windows. Jack never appeared. I laughed at my own foolishness. As expected, I was just a minor character in this story. Even if some side plots deviated slightly, nothing significant ever changed. The male lead would always end up with the female lead. The disposable supporting character would remain just that. I picked up my luggage and boarded another plane. The morning air in Beijing after the rain was unusually fresh. I told myself that, just as Jack had wished in the beginning, I would never return to Beijing again. Chapter 13. The following summer, in a quiet southern town, I gave birth to my daughter, Lulu, not the boy described in the book. Perhaps the moment I left Beijing, some things had already begun to change in ways I couldn't foresee. A tiny ripple, insignificant on its own, had somehow disrupted the tide. But I wasn't disappointed. On the contrary, I felt a profound sense of joy. A daughter. Even if Jack were to find out one day, he wouldn't try to take her from me. All I wanted was to cherish and protect this little one, giving her everything I had missed in my own life. Miss Lou, come look. Lulu's smiling, the nanny said, bringing the pink bundle to my bedside. I glanced down at Lulu, fast asleep but smiling in her dreams. She's such a beauty. Miss Lou, not even a month old, and you can already tell she's going to be stunning. They say daughters take after their fathers. Jack was undeniably handsome, so it made sense that his daughter would be beautiful. I gently held Lulu's tiny hand. A bittersweet warmth filled my chest, but it was quickly overtaken by an overwhelming sense of happiness. Chapter 14. When Lulu was 6 months old, I saw Jack on TV for the first time. It struck me as odd, no matter how private and low-profile Jack was. During the 2 years I spent with him, he'd had to attend a few unavoidable public events. Though his exposure was minimal, it wasn't as though he'd completely vanished. Yet in the year since I left Beijing, it was as if Jack's name had been wiped off the face of the earth. So when I suddenly heard his name and saw his face on TV after all this time, I was stunned. He had lost so much weight. His already lean frame now appeared almost gaunt. His complexion, once healthy, was pallid, carrying a faint sickliness. What shocked me most was how his entire demeanor had changed. If he had once been cold and composed, he now exuded a world-weary indifference. A reporter attempted to interview him. Mr. Han, with Miss Ma's art tour successfully concluded, can we expect an announcement about your upcoming wedding? Apologies. Mr. Han won't be answering any personal questions today. His assistant interjected, while bodyguards swiftly pushed the reporters back. Jack didn't say a word. He suddenly stood and, in a breach of decorum, walked out mid-event. The broadcast quickly cut away. Scrambling to cover the disruption, I stood frozen in front of the TV, my heart sinking as I watched him leave. In that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the darkness in his eyes, a void of emptiness. A heavy ache weighed on my chest, inexplicably suffocating. It wasn't until Lulu woke up crying that I snapped out of it. I picked up my daughter, her tear-streaked little face pressing against mine. Her thick, dark brows resembled Jack's. Her nose, with its pronounced bridge, was distinctly Jack's as well, but Jack didn't know she existed, and perhaps he never would. That somewhere in this world, there was a little girl, a beautiful child, who was his daughter. A daughter born to Angelica, just for him. Chapter 15. When Lulu was 10 months old, I weaned her. When she was a year and a half, I returned to Beijing for the first time. A college roommate who had bought me breakfast for an entire semester was getting married. She wanted me to attend her wedding, and I couldn't refuse. Over the years, I had faced more malice than I could count, but there had been a few people who treated me with kindness and concern, rare as they were, and I treasured them deeply. On this trip, I privately tried to inquire about Jack. His condition had seemed off, and I was worried about his health. After the wedding, a friend called me. They say that big shot of yours is getting married soon, to the famous new artist, the one who just finished her art tour. Thank you, I replied softly. By the way, why is your friend asking about him? I'm not sure. Just thank you for her. After hanging up, I found myself unable to recover for a long while, until a voice suddenly rang out behind me. Angelica? It really is you. I thought that back view looked familiar. Turns out I was right. You've gained a bit of weight, though, and your chest is bigger too. Ugh. So unfair. You're even more attractive to men now. The young woman, dressed up like a sparkling Christmas tree, stomped her foot in mock indignation. I recognized her immediately. She was one of the socialites I used to share tea with, the kind who pried into Jack's private life with relentless curiosity. But I had no desire to reconnect with anyone from my past. I nodded politely and turned to leave. Wait, it's been ages since I've seen you. Where have you been? She asked, blocking my way. Sorry, I have something urgent. Angelica, I heard, she interrupted, grabbing my arm, leaning in conspiratorially. Her voice brimmed with excitement. They say Jack was in a car accident and almost died. Then you took his money and vanished into thin air. Is it true? If it is, you're something else. How dare you show your face in Beijing again? Chapter 16. It felt as though ice water had seeped into my veins. My fingers turned icy, trembling as I gripped her arm tightly, my nails digging into her flesh. She yelped in pain and shoved me away, but I didn't even notice. I stared at her blankly, asking, who did you say was in a car accident? Jack. Of course, you didn't know, she replied, covering her mouth. Oh, right. The Han family issued a gag order. It was kept very hush-hush. When did it happen? How badly was he hurt? Please, tell me, I pleaded, but she clammed up, shaking her head. I didn't say anything, Angelica. We never met tonight, and I never saw you. Got it? She hurriedly left, leaving me rooted in place, dazed and disoriented for nearly 10 minutes. It wasn't until I unconsciously dialed the all-too-familiar number that I snapped back to reality. But Jack's number had long since been disconnected. I called for a car and headed to the one-residence villa. The entire ride, my thoughts were chaotic. Lara's words echoing endlessly in my mind. Jack was in a car accident and almost died. How bad must it have been for him to be described as almost dying? No wonder he was so thin, his complexion so pale. Lulu was already a year and a half. I had left Beijing more than 2 years ago. In all that time, he hadn't been able to recover his health. What kind of horrific accident had it been? I couldn't bear to imagine. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, jolting me back to my senses. What identity? What right did I have to face Jack again? To Lara and her ilk, I was nothing but a gold digger. And to Jack? Instinctively, I turned to leave, but the car ahead of me suddenly stopped. Chapter 17. Why are we stopping? Inside the car, Jack frowned impatiently, glancing at the driver. He had drunk a bit too much tonight, his head pounding, his mood sour. The driver hesitated, glancing at something outside. But before he could respond, Camila interrupted. It's nothing, just some random person. Keep driving. The driver glanced at Jack through the rearview mirror. Jack leaned back in his seat, his expression the usual blend of irritation and apathy. He made no move to contradict Camila. The driver remained silent, and the car resumed its slow crawl forward. I stood by the roadside, watching the car pass. It moved sluggishly, the rear window lowering a fraction. In the dim light, I caught a glimpse of Camila's flawless, beautiful face, and beside her, a fleeting profile of Jack. Camila's gaze skimmed over me like a feather, indifferent and disdainful. She didn't need words or gestures to utterly defeat me. This was the aura of the female lead. When Jack was injured, it must have been Camila by his side. Naturally, he would marry her after regaining his health. The Maybach disappeared behind the villa gates, its taillights fading into the distance. I turned around, walking into the night, each step heavier than the last. Chapter 18. Inside the one-residence villa, Camila reached out to help Jack, but he brushed her hand away. Margot, arrange for a driver to take Miss Ma home. Without sparing her a glance, Jack staggered toward the main building. His assistant hurried to support him, and this time, Jack didn't push him away. Standing behind him, Camila felt a pang of bitterness. She couldn't understand where things had gone wrong. When she returned to Beijing, she had expected Jack to pursue her again, to marry her without hesitation. Even her inability to have children hadn't deterred him. Yet now, 2 years had passed, and Jack remained as distant as ever. showing her nothing beyond polite friendship. If it hadn't been for her insistence on staying by his side during his rehabilitation after the accident, his attitude toward her might have been even colder. Disheartened, Camila climbed into the car. Meanwhile, Jack went upstairs. The villa had been redecorated during his hospitalization after the accident. The master bedroom's layout and furnishings were entirely different. He dismissed his assistant and sat on the sofa for a moment before heading to the walk-in closet. Inside were numerous women's belongings and clothes, all Camila's. Before the accident, they had already been living together. She was his girlfriend, his first love, at least. That's what everyone had told him when he woke up. Camila herself had said as much. They were a perfect match. Destined to marry, she would one day be his wife. But for reasons he couldn't explain, while Camila was beautiful and accomplished, he didn't dislike her. Yet he didn't like her either. The alcohol made him feel warm and restless. He yanked off his tie, tossing it onto the vanity. The gesture accidentally knocked over a small box. Inside were two thumb-sized wooden figurines, a boy holding a girl's hand. Jack picked them up absent-mindedly, about to set them down again when something caught his eye. Turning the figures over, he saw tiny words carved into the base. Ange loves Jack. Chapter 19. Jack stood there for nearly 10 minutes, holding the wooden figurines. Suddenly, he turned and left the bedroom, striding quickly downstairs. Margot, get the car ready. For some reason, a fleeting image of a lone figure under the street lamp at the villa's gates flashed through his mind. The car sped off, exiting the private road and stopping at the intersection with the main street. The night was deep. Birds had long returned to their nests, and the road was silent save for the occasional passing car. There was no one else in sight. Jack clenched the figurines in his hand and glanced at Margot, the seasoned driver who had worked for the Han family since Jack was a child. Margot, do you know who Ange is? Margot visibly stiffened but quickly forced a smile to deflect. Young master, I've never heard of that name. Back then, the incident caused such a stir. Jack had been in critical condition for 3 days, barely clinging to life. The family elders were furious, and Angelica's name became taboo in the Han household. Who would dare bring it up? Jack let out a low chuckle. I know you're all hiding something from me. Young master, Margot hesitated. But it's fine. I'll figure it out myself. Margot paled. Young master, you know how much your parents wept and struggled for your recovery after the accident. Jack raised his cold, sharp eyes, his aura seemingly even frostier since his recovery. Margot was terrified. Young master, so what does all of this have to do with this Ange? And nothing. There's no such person, Margot stammered. Jack's gaze dropped back to the figurines in his hand. His smile was faint but unsettling. How do you know she's a woman? Miss Lou, it's clearly a girl's name. Margot froze mid-sentence, realizing his slip. Oh, Miss Lou, Jack said quietly, his tone sharp. Chapter 20. Margot's face went blank with panic. Young master, what's her full name? Angelica. The woman I lived with at the one residence, she was Angelica. Not Camila, wasn't she? Yes. My car accident, was it because of her? That night, Miss Lou left abruptly. You traced her flight and were on your way to find her when the storm caused your accident. Why did she leave? Margot was drenched in cold sweat. Trembling. Young master, just say it. Don't worry. If my parents hold you accountable, I'll handle it. It might have been because of Miss Camila. What did she do? When Miss Camila returned to the country, you were very close to her. Margot explained cautiously, glancing at Jack's reaction. Miss Lou may have misunderstood and gotten jealous. Jack couldn't recall the details, but he was certain of one thing: he felt no romantic affection for Camila. As for being close to her, Jack frowned. It didn't sound like something he would do. Margot added the final blow. You hosted a welcome party for her and helped organize her art exhibition. For several days, you didn't come home, leaving Miss Lou alone. For the first time, Jack's composure cracked. I don't even like her. Why would I do such a thing? Margot gave him a kindly, knowing smile. Young master, you and Miss Camila grew up together. Childhood sweethearts. You once said you'd marry her when you grew up. But as you got older, you stopped liking her. For reasons no one knew. Miss Camila was devastated and even attempted to take her own life. You felt guilty and promised your families you'd help her and the Ma family as compensation. So, the exhibition was because of that promise? Jack asked. Marco hesitated before nodding. As far as I know, yes. Jack's final question cut through the air like a knife. So, between Camila and me, nothing happened, correct? To my knowledge, nothing at all, Marco confirmed. Jack exhaled deeply, as though a weight had been lifted. Chapter 21. I took Lulu to the amusement park. At just over 2 years old, she was already a clever, mischievous little thing. She started walking and talking earlier than most kids her age. Now, Lulu could string together clear, full sentences with ease. While she played in the ball pit, I sat outside, waiting. Suddenly, the mall's TV switched to a breaking news segment. Jack appeared on the screen, dressed in a tailored black business suit, gold-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He looked so dazzling it could make anyone lightheaded, yet cold enough to freeze them solid. I don't have a girlfriend. I'm single, unmarried. He cast a frosty glance at the reporter. And I have no engagement or fiancé. What about Miss Ma? Just a childhood friend, he replied curtly. The reporters exchanged awkward glances. The line was drawn so clearly it left no room for speculation. What was just a childhood friend? Did that mean they weren't even friends now? I felt my heart constrict painfully. I tried to stay rational, to distract myself, but I couldn't stop staring at Jack on the screen. At that moment, his gaze seemed to pierce through the camera, locking onto mine. I didn't hear what the reporter asked next. Jack's lips curved faintly, his eyes tinged with a rare hint of warmth. There was an ex-girlfriend, he said, his voice calm. She dumped me. I nearly dropped my purse. Mr. Han, can you share why she broke up with you? A reporter pressed. Jack adjusted his glasses, his tone indifferent. No particular reason. Maybe I just wasn't good enough, too ordinary. The reporters were baffled, but my face burned crimson. No one around knew me. No one paid attention to me, yet I still felt as if I'd been caught stealing. Hurriedly hiding my face behind my bag, I scooped Lulu out of the ball pit and held her close. Lulu pouted, on the verge of tears. Sweetheart, I'll buy you an ice cream. I coaxed her. Her mood shifted instantly. After getting her a cone, I tried to shake off the overwhelming emotions stirred up by the news. I joked and laughed with Lulu, focusing all my attention on her. It was all a dream, I told myself. Or maybe I was just overtired from caring for my daughter. But when a Rolls-Royce Cullinan suddenly pulled up nearby, drawing every gaze in the vicinity, an alarm went off in my mind. I froze, unable to stop myself from turning around. Lulu, still licking her ice cream, looked over curiously as well. When Jack stepped out of the car, I heard gasps from the people around us. My vision blurred with spots of light, and I felt dizzy, as if I'd been thrown back to the moment I first met him. He walked straight toward us. Angelica. Who is she? His gaze locked onto mine as he pointed at Lulu. She's my sister. Cute, isn't she? My hands trembled as I stumbled over my words. Lulu, catching on immediately, dashed forward and wrapped her arms around Jack's leg. Her ice cream smeared across his trousers, leaving a sticky stain. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by despair. Sir, isn't my sister beautiful? She's single, unmarried, and totally available. Lulu's sweet, innocent voice carried a charm that could melt the hardest of hearts, but I wasn't sure if it would move Jack. Your sister? He asked. Yes, she's my sister. Jack let out a soft chuckle, bending down to lift Lulu into his arms. I was so nervous I dug my nails into my palms. Mr. Han, I stammered. Jack ignored me, focusing on Lulu. What's your name? Lulu, she answered proudly. Jack frowned and finally looked at me, his expression questioning, as if asking, what kind of ridiculous name did you give our daughter? How old are you? 2 and a little bit, she replied. How much is a little bit? Lulu looked to me for help. Mommy, how much is a little bit? I quickly raised my bag, using it to cover my face like a shield. Chapter 22. As clever and charming as Luciana was, she was no match for Jack. The old fox. Jack held her in his arms and turned toward the car. Angelica, come here. Resigned. I followed him and got into the car. Jack took out a wet wipe and began meticulously cleaning Luciana's sticky little hands. Luciana was completely captivated by him. Mister, are you married? She asked, tilting her head. No, he replied. Do you have a girlfriend? Also no. Luciana immediately wrapped her chubby arms around his, looking up at him earnestly. Look at my mommy, mister. Jack glanced at me, his tone casual. I've seen her. Isn't she beautiful? She's all right, he said, nonchalantly. I couldn't help but shoot him a glance, silently rolling my eyes. Liar. Luciana, however, pouted theatrically. I didn't even know she was this dramatic. Then you must not think I'm pretty either. She sniffled. Jack pinched her chubby cheek. How could I not? You're very pretty. But I look just like mommy, she declared. That's true, he admitted. Luciana's expression turned pitiful as she continued. I've never had a daddy since I was born. Sniff. Sniff. Can you be my daddy, mister? You were so gentle when you cleaned my hands. Jack sighed, taking a tissue to wipe her tears. It's not that I don't want to. It's just that your mom doesn't want me. Luciana's eyes widened in shock. And so did mine. Jack, I started. He looked at me, his tone even. After all, I'm just ordinary. Clearly, this was a grudge he wasn't letting go of anytime soon. Chapter 23. After putting Luciana to sleep, I decided it was time to have an honest conversation with Jack. There was no way I would give up custody of my daughter. And letting Camila raise her? Absolutely out of the question. If anyone tried to tear us apart, I would sooner jump into the river outside the villa with Luciana in my arms. Fueled by a mix of determination and righteous fury, I stormed into the living room, ready for battle. Jack, we need to talk. Jack was lounging on the small sofa in my modest living room, his long legs looking uncomfortably cramped. Perfect. I've been meaning to talk to you too, he said, taking off his glasses and placing them on the coffee table. His gaze locked onto mine. Angelica, you first, I said, trying to sound composed as I sat down across from him in one of Luciana's tiny chairs. Let's talk about why you dumped me, he said, his tone as calm as if he were discussing the weather. I froze, unable to get a single word out. How could I explain this to him? Should I tell him we were characters in a book? Even I wouldn't believe that. If you can't give me a reasonable explanation. Angelica, he said, his voice low, his gaze unwavering. You know there will be consequences. I swallowed nervously, my mind racing. After much hesitation, I decided to tell the truth, no matter how ridiculous or pitiful it sounded. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face. Jack, they say a couple shares a bond after spending even a single night together. We've been together for so long, and I even gave you a child. But you sent me to a mental institution and let me die there. Jack pinched the bridge of his nose, sighing. So, all this is because of a dream? It wasn't a dream, it was real. It's the plot of a book. And it actually happened. And in this book, I married Camila? Yes. And the son I supposedly had? Yes. And the 1 billion yuan I gave you? That's because I knew the plot ahead of time and left. That's why things changed, I said, wiping my red, puffy eyes. But I don't care about all that. If you try to take Luciana from me, you'll have to kill me first. What kind of nonsense are you thinking? Jack stood, walked over, and lifted me from the tiny chair like a child. Angelica. But that's how the story goes. The details might change, but the ending never does, right? I mumbled, feeling more and more wronged. The male lead always ends up with the female lead. Otherwise, how could he even be the male lead? Jack cupped my face, gently wiping the tears from the corners of my eyes. Then why couldn't it be that I fell for you? That from the moment I did, the entire plot of the book changed? His voice softened, his gaze steady and warm. The male lead might be with the female lead, but in a love story, the woman the male lead loves is the true female lead. Angelica, can't you feel it after 2 years together? The one I love is you. Chapter 24. I couldn't bring myself to believe it. That Jack could love someone like me. The gulf between us was as vast as the sky and the earth. Jack seemed to sense my hesitation, but he only said one thing. Angelica, if we truly are characters in a book, then what's so unreasonable about the two of us being together? I was still doubtful. Jack, do you think the author is crazy? He smirked. You're overthinking. They just wrote it this way because readers like it. But how could readers enjoy a story about a side character overshadowing the first love? As if reading my mind, Jack said, Camila isn't my first love. Before you, I never had anyone. I opened my mouth to respond, but Jack spoke first. And you, Miss Lou, must have plenty of experience, right? I glared at him. Don't pretend. You've already investigated me, haven't you? Jack's lips curved into a teasing smirk. Then why would someone with your experience think I'm ordinary in bed? Jack, I exclaimed, stomping my foot and reaching to cover his mouth. Could he please stop bringing up that word? I was going to develop PTSD from it. Chapter 25. The night I took Jack to his hotel. As he was about to get into the car, he suddenly pinned me against the vehicle. There's an empty room. I protested. But no bed. No fresh linens. He replied, leaning closer, his breath warm against my skin. Jack tilted his head to kiss me. There are so many people here, someone might see, I whispered, my face burning. Say you missed me. Ange, tell me you think about me every day. Jack didn't care, his kiss growing deeper and more insistent. I shook my head, refusing to say it. I couldn't admit it. Not just every day, I thought about him every second, every minute. But I didn't want him to know. He had told me Camila wasn't his first love, but he still hadn't explained their supposed engagement or why she had been with him that night. I think about you, Ange, he murmured, his voice a mix of longing and tenderness. Every day, every night. The sound of distant laughter and children playing drifted on the night breeze. I struggled weakly, lifting my foot to lightly kick his shin, trying to remind him we weren't alone. Under the dark sky, his gaze was filled with both desire and gentleness. My heart burned. My limbs turned to jelly. Between breaths, I murmured his name. Jack, I've been back to Beijing, I admitted softly. I know, he said. You know? Jack raised a hand to wipe the tears from the corner of my lips. I didn't realize it was you at the time. I stared at him, confused. After the car accident, I forgot some things, he said, as though it was no big deal, but I couldn't hold back my tears. I had noticed the scar on his brow earlier that day. Even after all this time, it was still faintly visible. I couldn't imagine how horrific it must have been. The day you returned, I started to remember. He continued, I should have come to find you and Luciana sooner, but there were too many things in Beijing I needed to settle first to ensure you both could come back without worry. Jack leaned down, kissing my tears gently. Come back to Beijing with me, Ange. Let's get married. Chapter 26. Preparing to return to Beijing turned out to be more time-consuming than I had anticipated, delaying us by another 2 or 3 days. But Jack, impatient as ever, didn't wait. He bought a bed and all the necessary items, then promptly moved out of his hotel and into the small apartment Luciana and I shared. Who would have thought, though, that trouble would arrive unexpectedly, in the form of my father? Luciana was beyond excited and refused to sleep. Even as the clock struck 11, Jack and Luciana stared each other down. But in the end, Jack was the one who conceded defeat. Feeling sorry for him, I scooped Luciana into my arms. Time to go to bed, sweetheart. I want to sleep with Daddy, she declared. I pinched her little cheeks and whispered in her ear. Don't you want a baby brother or sister? Mommy and Daddy have to sleep together to make that happen. Luciana immediately hugged my neck tightly. Okay, Mommy, I'll go to bed. As we reached the doorway, she turned back to look at Jack. My heart sank. Sensing trouble, I moved to cover her mouth. But it was too late. Luciana gave him a little thumbs up and shouted, Good luck, Daddy. Luciana wants a baby brother tomorrow. Chapter 27. I stared at the torn nightgown lying on the carpet. Jack! I glared at him. What is wrong with you? Why do you keep ripping my clothes? Ange, you've gained weight, he said, effortlessly shifting the topic. I froze. After giving birth to Luciana, I had struggled with some body image issues. I'd started working out as soon as I stopped nursing, and I was now back to my pre-pregnancy weight. But hearing Jack say I'd gained weight, I'll start dieting tomorrow, I blurted out instinctively. You will not, Jack said firmly, pulling me into his arms. His gaze dropped to my chest. You're perfect like this. But you just said I gained weight. You were too thin before. If I don't stay thin, I won't fit into half my clothes. Basic professionalism. Jack. He kissed my forehead softly. I won't let you go through that again, Jack. Those 2 years we were together. I wasn't unhappy. Really. You treated me so well. Better than I ever deserved. I rested my head on his chest, my voice quiet. At first, I was just scared of being poor and desperate to improve my life. But in the end, I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of his embrace. I realized I couldn't leave you. Ange, he murmured, lowering his head to kiss me. I'll give you all the money you could ever need. But more importantly, I'll give you all the love in the world. And Luciana? Of course. Her too, Jack replied with a soft chuckle. Then he added, almost casually, Luciana was breastfed, wasn't she? Yes, that explains it. What does it explain? He tightened his hold on me. The day I saw you in that white dress, it was a bit tight, and every man who passed by couldn't help but look at you. Were you jealous? I teased, trying to hide my grin. Very jealous, he admitted, kissing me deeply. Ange, you're only allowed to let me look. I already only let you. I whispered. Luciana wants a little brother, he said, his voice dropping. She's always wanted one, I replied. And you? Do you want one? I'm a little scared, I confessed. Scared of what? Scared the plot will reset, I said, my voice trembling. Scared you'll be drawn into it and fall for someone else again. That won't happen, he said with absolute certainty. I saw the sincerity in his eyes. Jack, I want to believe you, I whispered. But promise me, if that day ever comes, don't separate a mother from her child. I couldn't survive it. Ange, he said, his voice soft and steady. Trust me. Chapter 28. 10 years into our marriage. Jack woke me up in the middle of the night. Jack, what are you doing? It's the middle of the night, I groaned, half asleep. Ange, why did you tell people I'm ordinary in bed? I was too tired to argue and smacked the bed in frustration. What did you want me to say? That Mr. Han is a legend in bed? You should have been honest, Jack said, rubbing my face affectionately before flipping me onto my back. Luciana and her brother aren't home tonight. Ange, you can be as loud as you want. I don't want to, I protested. I want to sleep. Jack. Then close your eyes and sleep, he said, his warm hands pulling me closer. How am I supposed to sleep like this? I muttered. Be good. Ange, just once. He coaxed. Clearly not as strong as you used to be. I quipped. I regretted it immediately. But it was too late. That night, I was indeed loud enough for the entire staff to avoid eye contact with me the next day. I also woke up with a hoarse voice. Furious. I kicked Jack out of the bedroom that night. But somehow, one thing led to another, and we ended up playing out a scene in his study. This life was becoming impossible. Chapter 29. Many years later, I saw Camila again. By then, our hair had turned white. She brought up the past, her tone tinged with lingering resentment. Angelica, after Jack's car accident, everything could have gone back to normal. I was supposed to be his leading lady. But why? Even after he forgot you, didn't he love me? I didn't know how to answer, so I glanced over at Jack, who stood not far away. Even in his later years, he was tall, handsome, and still capable of making my heart race. You've found your own leading man, haven't you? I reminded her. Camila sighed, her gaze lingering on Jack. Some things are hard to let go of. I didn't reply. She was too old to be this dramatic. Instead, I walked toward Jack, who met me halfway and took my hand. Our grandchildren were playing nearby with a pair of delicate wooden figurines. They suddenly noticed the words carved into the base. In their childish voices, they read them aloud. Ange loves Jack. Jack loves Angelica. Wow, it's Grandpa and Grandma's names. Jack and I exchanged a smile. The thing I was most grateful for in this life was that the story's ending turned out the way we wanted. We had finally achieved our happy ending.